Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm your host, Ade Darami, and have, as always, my co-host, Mr. Mboj. Mr. Mboj, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ade. Glad to be here.
Great to hear that. And for viewers, old and new, we go through 10 stories that we've kind of looked at through the week. President Barrow's arrival, he's just about to conclude his Meet the People tour. Schools have reopened. There was a shocking case involving alleged abuse of a minor, and of course, green light given by the UK for its citizens to come to the Gambia. That's just one of 10 that you'll be hearing. So, first one, the President is just concluding his Meet the People tour, and here's some footage. Have a look.
This is the scene as a warm welcome greets President Adama Barrow as he arrived in the West Coast region from his constitutionally mandated tour of the provinces, where he had the chance for dialogue with the people who aired their concerns and his government's response measures to bring much needed development for the country. Thousands have converged to give an electrifying welcome to the head of state as he made his way from the West Coast region to the capital, Banjul. For some of these supporters, their support for the president is anchored around the peace, freedom and the developments registered in the 4 years of his presidency.
For democracy, it is prevailing in the country. Even the media is free, to which you can be a living witness. A president who has mercy and love for his country is what we want.
There you had a president who has mercy and love for his country. Mr. Mboj, I probably asked you this before. In Sierra Leone, we don't have anything like this. And I just wondered, has this always been a thing? The kind of Meet the People tour, as in back in the days of Jawara, did they have something like this as well?
Yeah, yes, they did. I think at some point it was called Meet the Farmers tour.
Right.
That was something like that.
Which tells you kind of focus.
That kind of tells you the focus, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've always had this, and then when they said constitutionally mandated, this is really a tradition,
right,
as it were.
So carried on. I mean, looking at the pictures there, lots of enthusiastic crowds, and I smile because when I think about Sierra Leone, and this, you might not believe this, but there are certain areas where even for the president actually would be a no-go area because there's such a strong opposition stronghold. But I didn't get the sense of this when I watched this. The president went everywhere and there seemed to be huge enthusiastic crowds.
That's absolutely so. It doesn't quite exist here, just as that we saw that interviewee, as it were, in the program, saying that there's the democracy and people are seeing lots of roads, road constructions and the like. So we haven't reached a point where you might get an area where they have this sort of strong hatred, as it were, antipathy for the president.
Yes.
It doesn't exist.
Yes.
Even in sort of so-called UDP strongholds, still they will, welcome the president. Perhaps it's part of the attraction, the attractiveness, as it were, of incumbency. He's the president. I didn't know, but we haven't seen any area where you have a strong opposition to the president.
Because in Sierra Leone, again, sorry to keep going back to that, as people move around, that strength of single party in a region has become diluted, but not to the extent where the oppositions have made sort of significant gains. So, for example, in the south and the east of the country, SLPP, mainly the Mende people, who, including the current president, for all of my life, they've been the only party that's kind of won sort of 90 or 99% of seats. And if you go to the northern part of the country, Makeni, where the former president Ernest Koroma came from, in fact, where he now lives, he has a huge mansion there, again, it was the Timni people. And so there are times when presidents would not actually dare go. So this was quite encouraging, and maybe the Gambia can sort of teach countries a thing or two. But one of the things I liked about this one, because I watched every day, was that what you got was, it wasn't just the president standing there and preaching to people. People came and they talked about their gripes, things that they wanted fixed, and they didn't hold back. I mean, it wasn't all kind of sweet and light, as if everything is perfect. People came and they told him, we don't like this, we don't like that. What are you going to do about it? I mean, has that always been a feature as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So this is really the whole point of it, as he said, on the very first day, I think when he got to Barra, that this dialogue, that's it. So they praised him for the development projects, for the improvements that we've seen so far. Yes. But they also told him, as he said, they're gripe. So that is the whole point of it, really. So quite healthy in our own way, just as we have the marbles, we have our own traditions of how we do our democracy.
Indeed, and they brought it down to basics. We want boreholes. We want electricity, we want tractors, we want drilling machines and milling machines. And so they brought it down to the nitty-gritty of the things that they need for their lives and their livelihoods.
That's it, the same old stuff. Most places they went to stuff like that, basic stuff. So that is the key, that must be the focus, everywhere. And I think the president knows that. He announced the building, the construction of health centers, skills centers. That's right. So one gets the suspicion, one gets the idea that he understands what they want, and we will see, but again, put in the context of a contracting economy because of the COVID-19. So one will see how he will deliver given our economic circumstances.
And let's just for a minute be brutal here. This has come at a very nice time for the president. There's an election around the corner, and he has had this fantastic opportunity to go out. It's not a campaign exactly, but he's gone out and he's set out his story. This is what I've done and this is what I could do for you, in a way that none of these other candidates can do.
Absolutely, that's really the advantages of incumbency. And you've been reading in the papers some people saying that, why has he politicized the store and the like? Then to my mind, I'm not sure what you mean by that. The very act of going itself is political in itself. So even Jawara, sort of milked it for the PPP. Everybody will do that. So I don't understand what people mean by they shouldn't politicize it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Unavoidable. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And, as we say, the election is around the corner, December 4th, presidential election. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But, of course, you'll be seeing all of that on QTV. So thanks for that. And now on something completely different. Believe it or not, Mr. Mboj and I were once schoolboys. Yeah, no, really. And schools have reopened. And we take a look at some folks in Farafenye talking about the reopening of schools. Have a look.
Susan Saku is also a student at the same school.
We are prepared, though it was not nice at all, because they told us that we were going to open on the 13th, and now they told us that on the 20th. And now that we have opened, I was wondering, how can we open without the grade 12s finishing their exams? So they told us that they have already arranged for that. And today we went to the school and everything was fine. But what we didn't like was that we were to go morning shift, but they told us to go to afternoon shift until when the grade 12s finish their exam. But that's nothing, because it's only for 1 week.
The schools we visited so far, it appears both principals, teachers and students are looking forward to a new academic year. Susan Saku is also
looking forward to a new academic year, as I used to do, Mr. Mboj. I think some of us, as we get older, we kind of sugarcoat our school days. And I was saying to somebody today before I came into the studio, I said, I don't do that. I mentioned that I had some of the best and some of the worst times when I was at school. I was forever being caned because I was deemed to be disruptive. So those weren't good times, but I made, obviously, lifelong friends. But, Mr. Mboj, what we've got now is that in the time of COVID, when, of course, schools were locked for quite a long time, we're now back to some sort of normalcy. And so it's great to see things like this, isn't it?
Yes, I like that, some form of, because we have to adjust, as it were, a bit in the classroom, for instance, social distancing and the like. And what we saw there, we've abandoned the mask.
You took the thought right out of my head, Mr. Mboj. I was about to say, we're told that COVID has not gone away. COVID is real, COVID is still here. And yet, in that report, if people saw the longer version of the report, nobody wore a mask. So we seem to have abandoned this. Is it time for that message to be reiterated?
Oh, we must, because we know that even though people of a certain age bracket, kids, they are sort of low risk group of contracting it, but they're not immune.
Indeed.
And this virus is still mutating.
Yes. Yes.
We really have no idea where it is going. So the quicker you deal with it and observe all the safety measurements, the better.
Yes, I mean...
So we should be very, very careful.
We should be careful. And of course, in Britain right now, the debate is whether 12 to 15-year-olds should be given. And it's, you know, the British haven't had a revolution for a long time, but I think this one is threatening to cause one, because lots of parents are against it and are saying there's no science behind why 12 to 15-year-olds should be given it. And, you know, I saw one parent arguing. She said, look, I'm not against vaccines because my child is already vaccinated. But for something that does not seem to have a sort of high prevalence amongst children of that age, why do they need to get a vaccine? What are your thoughts? You're a parent with children of, you know, fairly young children. What are your thoughts on that?
That's, you know, with these things, in the end, it's a matter of judgment. The science can say whatever it does, but depending on my beliefs, they have this whole sort of cluster, as it were, of all sorts of beliefs. So it's a matter of judgment. If I were in that situation, I will look at what, by vaccinating this age bracket, what actually is it doing?
What's it going to achieve?
What is it going to achieve? So one would look at these things, and perhaps in some circumstances you will say no, and in others you will say yes. So it just depends. So right now it was really very difficult for any parent. What do I do? But as long as it's adding something, some kind of layer, it doesn't matter how low, how small, that's it. As long as it's providing some kind of layer of protection, I will probably say yes.
Right. I mean, and if I bring it back then to the Gambia, as I mentioned, you know, schools were closed for a long time. It gave schools an opportunity to kind of reassess. And yet we heard that a young girl saying that we were given one date, and then that date was changed. We were told we would be morning shift, and then it was afternoon shift. I mean, come on. They had all that time to plan it. Why didn't they at least get that bit right?
Absolutely. It's the same old story here, isn't it? And then in situations where things are so uncertain, you know, parents are confused. I imagine teachers, policymakers as well. What do you rely on, really? So we just have to sort of adapt to these changes and realize what we are in. And our policymakers as well, you know, try to not to send mixed sort of signals, be clear, think about it first, because you want to inspire confidence.
Indeed, yes.
So you can imagine in those students now, they wouldn't be that confident
in
the
system.
Hear
the confusion.
You can hear the confusion. So you don't want that, because you're a leader. You want to direct people, especially in an emergency. That's when you have to be authoritative, that sort of thing, so that we can help people. So they sort of saying one thing one moment and actually recanting, retracting, and then something else. It doesn't inspire confidence, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And on that note, confidence is what we need. And so it will be interesting to see whether going forward there are messages about, because I didn't hear, I have to be honest, about safety measures, including masks and so on, ahead of the schools reopening. There might have been those messages, but I honestly don't remember hearing or seeing them. You know, I didn't hear it on radio and I didn't see it on TV.
And this is where you need heads of schools to really show leadership. Everything really depends on the heads. I mean, we always talk about how weak institutions are. So what do we mean by reforming them? It must really come from the head. That's really what the key is. So wherever you see that people are not really applying the rules, one might perhaps suspect that there's a weak leadership, and we must say it.
Yeah, I think so. It's worth saying that. So thanks for that. So but good to see that the schools are open again, even though it makes my journey longer in the morning getting to work. But hey, a price worth paying to see schools get back to normalcy. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now, again, another completely, Gambia is one of these countries which depends quite heavily on tourism. And recently, there's been some very, very good news from the United Kingdom. You're thinking, what could that good news be? Has Boris Johnson resigned? No. Have a look.
I think the whole country is aware, the whole world is aware that Gambia has been given the green light in UK, and the British government are allowing people to come to Gambia and spend holidays here.
This is something highly significant because we did wonder, as you know, we heard about red lists, green lists, amber lists, and people were on tenterhooks. Whereas Gambia going to fall on that scale? But it seems to be that there is good news.
Absolutely, and it matters a lot because according to some figures, you know, in the past years, the British market constitutes about more than 40%
well, that's
of
right.
people who come.
Yeah.
So it matters a lot that we've got this. We've been put on the on the green list.
Yes, and in that
come.
report, our colleague actually recited the World Bank figure, which said that 40,000 came in 2019, which was 40,000 just from Britain. So that's a decent number. So hopefully we can get something close to that, because when you look in British papers, as I've been doing since the minister made that announcement, they're trying to encourage people to actually go on holiday, because it affects so many things. The people who sell you your tickets, the ticket agencies, the airlines, and of course the people who work on the airlines, and so you go to the airports, the baggage handlers and everything else. So it affects. So they've been trying to encourage people to, and in fact now in Britain, I think Heathrow and Gatwick, just for dropping somebody off, you get charged £5. It was free before. You could drop off and go. Now the mere fact of dropping off, even for a few seconds, you have, because they've lost so much money. But for the Gambia, airport has been refurbished and seems to be back on the way. But again, you and I know of places that closed down. So really, this is something that we have to sort of really, really celebrate, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I live within the tourism development area, TDA, so we've seen the damage, the impact of COVID-19 on the hospitality industry. A lot of them closed, perhaps the ones that still remain open are the big ones with lots of money. But most of the smaller ones are gone. And that's it. I was sort of also quite surprised, sort of reading, seeing in the media, that we thought that with the COVID-19 and the lockdown and all of that, people will sort of change habits, change. But it seems as if, and that they wouldn't come, they wouldn't want to travel. But it seems as if that's not quite so. It seems because of the lockdown, they've been locked in for some time.
They feel almost imprisoned. They feel almost imprisoned. I mean, some friends of mine have just been to a place called Santorini, which is not Italian, even though it sounds Italian. It's in Greece. It's an island in Greece. But in fact, the reason it's called Santorini is because at one point, Italian troops were stationed there, thanks to the internet. I found that out. And they said, they'd been in UK, they'd been through the lockdown thing, and they wanted to get out. They wanted to go somewhere. So they went for a week. And they had a wonderful time. And so there's this hunger to actually want to go out and explore beyond your borders. And of course people had become used to anyway, jumping on a plane and going somewhere. So, fingers crossed, Gambia is going to benefit from that.
Oh, absolutely. And then perhaps some of the factors that will also give them confidence would be perhaps if we had high vaccination levels.
Well, indeed,
so,
yes.
that sort of thing would inspire confidence, and absolutely. We know, well, we suspect, it's not safe to say we know, we suspect that we're not going to get this year the numbers that, for instance, when we had 2019, it is an improvement on 2018.
That would be beyond.
Yes, we hope we do, but we kind of suspect maybe we might get back to that 2022 December or 2023, stuff like that. Right. But perhaps with our tourism, maybe it's the longer term. What is this strategy?
Yes.
At some point we heard from our minister that they will build 5 sort of tourism centers, cultural centers all over the place. Yes. Some people who experts in this area saying that they are not sure the government should be making that kind of investment.
Sure.
How do we bring in a private sector? And let's be honest, who called the Gambia a Tinder dream for geriatrics? There is that element of sex tourism.
Yes, we have to be honest.
Yes, the minister denied it.
Yeah.
There's a UN report saying that children are not safe. There is that report. So we must think in the long term. How do we encourage? Do we
and even vary the type of tourists that we encourage to come.
Eco-tourism, heritage. I mean, Gambia should have been the home of all of these people.
Look at the way Ghana has benefited from heritage tourism. Yeah.
It was as if Roots was about a Ghanaian, crazy, not Kunta. That's
absolutely true.
So we should have been really ahead of everybody else because of that exposure.
And yet we're playing catch-up.
Now we're playing catch-up. And eco-tourism, there are so many different areas, but right now it's simply about sun, sea, beach, and all of that. And we face now coastal erosion.
Indeed.
See, so there are just so many challenges that the ministry must deal with, but it should be more facilitative.
Sure.
What do you do and let the private sector? I believe in private
I think
sector.
so. I think so. And hopefully people who are entrepreneurs will see the opportunities and go into it rather than government becoming involved.
Absolutely. And I've read certain reports that say, look, but there are so many areas that are untapped. So the opportunities are there. Yeah, sure. But government just move away from that. Perhaps that money, put it in agriculture, which employs so much, so many people, and yet what it contributes. So more of the productive sectors.
I think so. Good suggestion there. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for that. And now on to a completely different story again. Most of us who've grown up in Africa, we're used to, as I mentioned when we were talking about schools, I was regularly caned in school because I was found to be a bit too lippy, as they say. But sometimes people sort of meting out punishment to young children can take it too far, as happened in this case. Have a look.
Concern to any person, and I think we must say this is quite inhuman, it's quite degrading, and it's not in line with any other way that you could able to, handle a child, whether it is in terms of for the main purpose of disciplining. We think this is more of a violation. It's more like a worst form of abuse that we have ever seen. Of a concern.
They're from the Child Protection Alliance, talking about it being the worst type. Samboja was saying that we're used to this sort of thing, but what we seem to be getting used to, unfortunately, now is that if anybody watched that horrific video, somebody actually stood there and filmed it, quite calmly filmed it. It wasn't done surreptitiously. You could see that they were filming. And we had the other one about the young man who was allegedly about to steal, again beaten to death while several people filmed. This kind of desensitized thing. I mean, what is it about our so-called smartphones that's making us dumb or making us stupid and callous? What is it? I mean, for me, that's why I chose this story. I mean, the fact of the beating and so on is bad enough, but the fact that somebody calmly stood there and filmed it rather than intervened, for me, the shocking element of it.
Absolutely. So it really proves the importance of early conditioning, the sensibility, the emotions. It's all part of child rearing. Really, you need to talk about that, really. And then when it comes to parenting, remember, spare the rod and spoil the child.
We used to hear that.
Yes. So we think that morally that's the right thing to do. So corporal punishment with us, it's sort of normalized.
I went to a primary school, Cathedral School, where, I'll name him, Mr. Cole. He used to walk around with his long cane, like this, and he'd just whip you for any old thing. And we got used to it because that was what happened. Of course, over time, things changed, and we thought, there are better ways of disciplining a child, and this one with a pestle.
Yes.
A pestle.
Absolutely
was what was used.
Yes, extreme. But again, growing up here, we've seen that sort of thing. We have to be honest. And quite interestingly, even the in our laws, the Children's Act, it says that you must respect the dignity of the child, but it doesn't prohibit corporal punishment. They call it what? Reasonable chastisement.
That's right.
Even the common law in English common law. Maybe we should go for completely to prohibit it. We never invented corporal punishment. We've seen it everywhere in the world. But again, with the increase of knowledge, child psychology, so laws, attitudes, societies began to change their views, their perception, how they interact with children. So knowledge must come back, as it were, to inform our social thinking, social decisions. So here we think that when we do that, otherwise it wouldn't be good for the child. You don't want to spoil the child and all that. But we all know that there must be punishment, systems of reward and punishment. We all do that. But there are more creative forms of punishment.
And less violent.
More appropriate forms of punishment. And hitting children, we know something else. It makes you a bad learner. Yes, it takes away the confidence. You want to prepare this person to go out there and compete with his peers and be winning, but you have no idea that you are breaking the person's confidence. You are breaking the person's capacity to learn. Now, in child psychology, we know all of that.
This is it. We really do need to change, and the people who do these sorts of things need to be ostracized by the society, but I think that day is a long way away.
That's it. But maybe the lack of education, they do not know much. How many would go and tell them about, child psychology, what is happening? And then when your kid grows up, you start telling him, oh, you're not trying, you're not pulling your weight, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. But you had no idea that you never prepared this kid. What you thought was preparation, you damaged his spirit.
And it's true, and it's quite shocking. But thanks for that, on that depressing note. Our fifth story now, cold storage for oyster farmers. It's one of the things that when we did the story, we were quite surprised that these mainly women were doing this, and a lot of their unsold stuff was going to waste and having to be discarded. For some of them, this has been sold. Have a look.
Oyster farmers within the KMC with cold storage facility to minimize post-harvest losses. At the event, the British High Commissioner to the Gambia, David Belgrove, reiterated the strong partnership between the Gambia and Britain, adding that the support is to provide more resilient and sustainable food production in the Gambia.
We're all aware of the challenges that climate change is bringing to everybody, but I think particularly for people who work and make their livelihoods from the land and from the rivers and from the sea and in food production. So this small contribution we can make towards making that more resilient and helping people be more productive, I think we're very pleased to be doing that.
Highlighting the importance of the project, Bina Marong, the KMC Women's representative, says inadequate storage is one of the challenges that KMC women oyster farmers face.
The women oyster sellers along the Banjul-Serekunda Highway always find it difficult to preserve oyster overnight. And this limited their productivity and also their ability to expand their earning.
At women oyster farmers within the KMC.
Anyone watching this show, either a new or old viewer, you know that not all stories are given the same amount of weight in terms of discussion. So this one, quite short, really, because a good thing, surely. Cold storage, where for years they've not had that, and now KMC and the British High Commission come together and provided them with cold storage.
Absolutely. We've long sort of realized the gaps, as it were, in the supply chain. And globally, about apparently 14% of food is wasted. And yet, from 2014, we were told by the FAO, the number of people finding themselves, being hungry or being malnourished has been rising. So there's some adjustments
yeah.
that we have to make here. But absolutely everywhere. And now, how do we sustain it?
This is it.
See, for us, we've had experience now. We know how these things are done. We're brilliant at starting things, but how do you sustain it?
That's right.
For me, that's really the worry from now on.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because when I newly arrived in the Gambia this time to live, I drove around, I saw lots of garbage trucks. And then I became aware of the ballot thing that KMC was doing. And I was saying, but there are, like, I've counted 20 or 30 garbage trucks around the greater Banjul area that are just rusting away, lack of sustainability. Well, this is something we should not allow to happen, surely, with something like this. It's fine now they've been given a cold storage. I would like to go and see in 6 months' time or a year whether it's been kept, in terms of maintenance and so on. Otherwise, they'll be back to square one.
I said, do we have a structure in place for that?
Sure.
Is there anybody who's going to monitor?
Yeah.
it seems so simple, but it's still quite difficult, as you say, in most areas. So there must be a structure in place. Sure. Not simply that people will volunteer to do things. That is not a structure at all.
That's not a structure. So that's not a system.
It's not a system at all. Right. So there must be that. And who is monitoring it? Sure. So we face huge difficulties in this area about our attitude. Yeah. That's really what it is in the end.
Sure. And as I said, I wish them luck, and I hope it's successful, and I hope they have a maintenance policy and structure and system going forward. At this point, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have 5 more stories. So don't go away. Join us after the break.
Looking for the fastest and easiest way to receive money transfers from abroad? Well, Q Money and RIA just made it happen. Now you can receive international money transfer from RIA directly into your Q Money account with no additional cost. Once you receive an SMS alert about your transfer, walk into any Q Money agent across the country to receive your payment for free, or use the money immediately to buy credit, Q Power, and other Q Money services. It's fast, safe, and convenient. For more info, call customer care on 133. Q Money, Sinu Calpe. Terms and conditions apply.
Check out the all-new Tigo 8 at S-Pass Motors. Call 3522-222 or 353-2222 for more information. Cherry.
Welcome back after that break. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm Adi Darami and my co-host is Mamadou Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thanks again for your interventions in the 5 stories so far. And for anyone just joining, you've missed 5 stories, but as I always say, 5 more to go, and they're equally as good. The next one, quick reaction force. Some Gambian forces are being trained for deployment in possible future missions. Have a look.
The Chief of Defense Staff of the Gambian Forces pledged to deploy a Gambian QRF company to the United Nations. We had no idea what the magnitude of the task would be. After the pledge, we were asked that in order to make good our pledge, we must complement our efforts with the acquisition of what we call the critical enablers, meaning we have to buy the armored personnel carriers and the required equipment and logistics in order to be able to sustain a quick reaction force in a UN peacekeeping mission. I am happy to report that as we speak, we have finalized all the procurement arrangements with a company, and hopefully the equipments that were requested by the UN will be coming to this source of this country beginning December.
Deputy CDS there. I must say, when I watched this report and I heard them talking about procurement of various equipment, I hope Gambia is not footing the bill for this, because some of this stuff, armored personnel carriers, quite expensive. But that's another thing. We're talking about a quick reaction force. And I did some searching, just saying, okay, what are the most recent? And the most recent one I came across was Rwanda's intervention in Cabo Delgado, where Islamists had driven people out and wrecked the town. If anybody doesn't believe me, go online and have a look. But it was quite different because they weren't invited there by the UN. And in fact, the person questioning them was saying, why are you here? Because they didn't just go for peacekeeping. They took the fight to the rebels and have driven them out. And driven them out, according to them, 95% of Cabo Delgado is now under Rwandan government control. But we don't expect that from our guys because they've done peacekeeping missions before, Darfur and other places. What's role do you see? I mean, we're talking about now, because previously they'd never said to us, oh, come with armored personnel carriers. And as far as I'm aware, there'd never been a quick reaction force before. They'd been strictly peacekeepers. This changes the narrative somewhat.
Absolutely, I understand that this kind of training is a necessary UN requirement.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
That's it. Because in all their missions, we contribute to UN missions. Without this training, you wouldn't contribute to UN missions.
That's right.
And we all know that, a lot of us, well, just perhaps all of them would love to go and serve in these UN missions because of the pay and the per diems and whatnot. So that is what it is. But again, if you look in the sort of Rwanda situation, well, what does that tell you? We understand that in military science, as it were, you need the quick response teams, as it were, in a developing situation. So it just tells you that they've got well-trained people, and based on their political interests, political decisions, they can do stuff like that. I'm not sure whether we are in that league at all. No, I suspect that for us now, most of our policies and whatever we'll do, we're doing, are all sort of determined by these bodies, international bodies, are so much in control of what we do now.
Indeed,
For how long we do not know.
We don't know, and it will be interesting to see where the quick reaction force is deployed next, because inevitably they will be deployed somewhere, because there are always things going on that need interventions and sometimes peacekeeping, and sometimes, as we said, quick reaction forces. So it will be quite interesting to see where our troops, GAMCOI, are sent next.
Absolutely. Who was it that said that the engine of history or politics is just events? It's the same everywhere. Events can just pop up anywhere. Right. So the need is really self-evident to have this quick response units ready for whatever happens. Events, there boy, events.
Indeed. And thank you for that. And for a while, us in Africa and the African Union were getting quite smug. Mr. Mboj, taking us on to our next story. We'd gone for quite a while without any coup d'etats in Africa. Then all of a sudden there seemed to be one every other week or every month. Most recent attempt, it was a coup plot, as far as we're aware, was in Sudan. Have a look.
Observers say some elements within the military are likely to be strongly opposed to a transition that will see them lose considerable power. Reuters news agency quotes the Sudanese military as saying 21 officers and a number of soldiers had been detained in connection with the failed coup, and authorities are continuing to search for the rest. Earlier reports on Tuesday from the capital, Khartoum, and nearby Omdurman described intense military activity and the main bridge across the River Nile shut. Shooting was heard near a military base housing a tank division in Omdurman, according to media reports. A moment later, a news flash on state TV said that a coup attempt had been thwarted. The coup plotters had tried but failed to take over a building housing the state media.
I'm smiling because growing up, there was a time when I wanted to join the army, believe it or not, Mr. Mboj. And one of the things that, when they used to discuss African coups and coup plots, was that they would always try and take over the state media. Because it was always housed in one place, and nobody seemed to have the brains to say, let's decentralize state media. So just because you take over one building doesn't mean you're in control of the state media. But to get serious about Sudan, since Bashir was kicked out, there's been this kind of uneasy marriage between civilians and the military, who still have quite a lot of power, and it seems allegiance to Bashir.
Absolutely, and I understand that there have been several coup attempts.
Indeed,
Actually,
and this is just the latest.
So that's it. So they're in a transition, aren't they?
Sure.
Since the toppling of Bashir, 2019.
That's right.
So this is it. Sudan is in very difficult.
They're trying to draft a new constitution. The previous constitution said you couldn't criticize the army, no matter what they did, and they're trying to kick that out of the constitution, because that's obviously not, in a democratic country you can't have nonsense like that. But I don't know. All these, since the kind of coalition of civilian military, it's been a kind of uneasy thing, really, because everybody's pushing for their own sort of interests, and of course self-interest.
That's precisely it.
Sure.
So it tells you there were a lot of people who were benefiting.
Indeed.
During Bashir's government.
Yeah, sure.
So with them, their interests are threatened.
Yeah, sure.
So they will do whatever they can
Yes.
to put themselves back in power. I think that the tide is against them.
Sure. I joked with somebody, I said maybe they've seen the draft of the new constitution, which strips away a lot of the power and there's even prestige, putting the military on some sort of pedestal, saying you can't criticize them, you can't this, you can't that. All of that has probably been taken out. They probably saw side of that, saying, oh, we don't like that. We want to still have this privileged position that we've always had.
Yes, that kind of thinking, I mean, intellectually doesn't have any credibility. The military must go back to the barracks, and civilians must rule.
Yes,
you know what I mean? So we've got this atavistic, as it were, way of doing things, looking back at this sort of big government with boots, big military boots, stopping on people to enforce whatever. That's over.
It's over.
There's never going to be peace then. You're going to keep on fighting for God knows how long.
Which takes me to another coup d'etat, the one in Guinea. We're talking about coup plot in Sudan. In Guinea, Doumbouya now seems to be involved in a spat with Museveni. Museveni is all the way in East Africa, but has taken to commenting, as has Museveni's son, interestingly enough, saying this sort of nonsense would never happen in Uganda. And today, Doumbouya fired back and said, you're as bad as Alpha Conde, referring to Museveni. He said, you have tweaked the constitution to your own benefit, not to the benefit of Ugandans. You've been in power for 34 years and you're trying to lecture me about democracy? Go away, I don't need you. I mean, he's been quite blunt.
How refreshing.
You know,
for a long time, the African presidents, be it in ECOWAS or African Union, I mean, these organizations were merely sort of talking shops. So that's it. So nobody would be critical of another president. But we need that internal criticism. Absolutely. It was just as with Mbalo in Guinea-Bissau, when he had a go at Conde. Himself wasn't it? Conde and Ouattara. Telling him, please. So we need this. We need this younger generation to come and tell these people what they should tell them. But again, do not commit the mistakes that they did.
That's it. That's it. Because, you know, I said to somebody when they were kind of passing this message around, Doumbouya's latest one, I said, yes, but wait until he becomes used to power and then judge him in a year or two's time. Then we'll know.
It's extremely difficult. I mean, the old power tends to corrupt. It's really a political truism.
It really is. And absolute power,
you know.
We know where that goes. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. I always talk about, this is one of my obsessions. You probably think I have nothing but obsessions. But, you know, cleaning the environment really is one of them. Anyway, have a look.
Annually, the Gambia joins the rest of the world to observe International Coastal Cleanup Day to remove trash from beaches, identify the sources of debris, and change the behaviors that deposit trash or garbage into the water in the first place. This pollutes the waters and the environment, potentially causing harm to humans, animals, and marine species. At the Tanje beach, Lamin Bojan, representing the Alcalo of Tanje, says the coastal town is one of the busiest and plays an important role in the country's fisheries sector. He expressed appreciation to NAFO and CAUPA for the initiative.
I'm very proud and very happy to receive them here. Their quota is very important in the cleaning exercise. The Tanje people and the entire community of Tanje, including the fisher folks of Tanje, we are very cooperative, and then we are very thankful, and then we are very happy to receive them all here.
So there, Mr. Mboj, you saw and you heard there. And you know, I confess I go to Tanje. I used to go every fortnight or so to buy fish, and I have to be honest, I was horrified at the rubbish that was strewn there. I know there. We heard them thanking CAUPA and others to come, but these are the people who live and work there. Surely they don't need somebody to come and tell them, keep this place clean. Do they?
Can you imagine how did it get there in the first place?
That's what I was thinking when I saw that, and that's why I chose that particular clip. Because, you know, it's like it didn't get there by itself. It got there. So, you know, I wanted them to say, you know, from now on we will make sure we will put systems in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. I didn't get that sense. It's just thanking people to come in, telling you, clean up your. It's like somebody coming to my house and say, clean up your sitting room or your kitchen.
Yes, and to make these dates, these commemorations truly significant, truly important, it must take every day.
Totally.
You know, so that sort of thing. That's it. So we all know, we see what happens with our trash, we just throw it about. Yeah. This is the sort of stuff that, for instance, when it rains, you know, the water, you know, the running water, you take it eventually.
Where did it all come from?
Absolutely.
Because we keep throwing it away.
We keep throwing it away, so eventually it ends up in the ocean. I've heard how many tons, 8 million tons of plastic, and we know the effect it's got on marine life, habitats, ecosystems, and all of these things. So this is it. It's just back home. Yeah. What is it that we do? Yeah. So there must be this element of people doing the right thing, and a bit of element of enforcement, authorities enforcing certain things.
You know, in the morning, I give some of my colleagues a lift, and in the evening, I give some other colleagues a lift home, you know, so, and they kind of laugh at me now because I'm always getting annoyed when somebody in the car in front of me throws out a cup or, you know, plastic cup or even a can, just dash it out of the window. You know, they're in a taxi or in a private car, and I'm thinking, I get mad and I start beeping them, and they're like, why is this guy beeping? Does he want to overtake? No, I don't want to overtake. I'm trying to tell you that is not right, because nobody's coming to sweep it up. So why are you just adding to the rubbish that's already there? I mean, similar to what we've just seen there in that video in Tangier. You know, it didn't get there by itself, as you say. But, you know, we need to take control and take ownership and say, I will stop doing this, including these people who throw stuff from their cars onto the road. You, the people who, this is your fish landing site, keep it in a way where it is kind of beneficial to the business you do as well as to your health.
Absolutely. And you realize that we're not shocked by it. That is why, you know, with the people, the passengers, they wouldn't really get, you know, the feeling, the emotional.
They just think. They just think, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Yeah. So this is it. That's really what we want to tackle. Sure. Where do we begin? Do we begin in schools? Sure. You know what I mean? So that we can change attitudes. But this is a huge problem. You see it all the time. Then you wonder why. Yeah. Why are we like this? I remember in one of V.S. Naipaul's books, you know, V.S. Naipaul, how he was like really with particularly with the African world, you know. So it was like, it seems as if these people are just naturally filthy. So I'm asking myself, why do we imitate our image? There are some things that are difficult to talk about, but we must talk about it. When you see people throwing things about, that's really disgusting. There's no sense of civility. There's no sense of being socialized, as it were, into a society, into a group. That would, I mean, you just don't know what to say. I mean, all the stuff that my enemies have been saying about me,
sure.
That's exactly what we do.
I'm living up to it, or living down to it.
It's really disgusting.
It's quite terrible. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. We've got 2 stories to go, and we're running out of time, but let's crack on. In a recent one, police officers have been trained by our Turkish counterparts, but a special kind of training. What sort? Have a look.
With the increase in terrorist activities around the world, most especially in our region, Sahel region, this topic couldn't have come at a better time. As we host the World next year, we are not taking national security for granted, which is why we are engaged in constantly improving our forces' engagement readiness and capability. As we speak, another 10-man delegation comprising senior officials from various security outfits is in Ankara, Turkey, undergoing another high-level security training in security planning and management for international conferences and events.
Mr. Mboj, as I said, we don't have much time, but 2 stories. I mean, the first one, and I didn't want this to follow on from the quick reaction force training, but this one, somewhat similar, because it's a specific type of training, and it's because we will be hosting the OIC summit in 2022, all things going according to plan. And so VIP training, protection of VIPs and so on. This is quite a task, isn't it? With the sort of number of delegates that are expected to come, and the rank of delegates that are expected to come to the OIC.
Second largest international gathering.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, at all. So absolutely. So the training, VIP, protection, counter-terrorism, and protection of important facilities. Oh, absolutely. Sure. We will be needing all of that. Yeah. And we just heard from the head of the OIC talking about the terrorism challenges now in the Sahel. Sure. So it's really quite worrying, especially what's been going on in Mali.
Well, indeed.
And talking about the Russian mercenaries, maybe the French will withdraw and the Germans. Right. So it's really quite scary. So we should really be very, very watchful, because the region is really threatened.
Be watchful, be vigilant, and be prepared.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And now on to something slightly similar or connected. Defense policy validation. I was shocked when I was told that this was the first national defense policy. I can't believe that, but that's what it says. Have a look.
The defense policy of any nation is an integral part of its foreign policies, which includes its territorial defense policy against external aggression. While the primary concern is to avoid war through diplomacy and deterrence, every nation ensures that its armed forces possesses the right capability and training to successfully defend its territorial integrity.
We've heard a lot, quite a lot has been said about reform of the security sector. This is another one. And it wants to map out in some detail, kind of end up with a sort of handbook of what the military should do, how they should conduct themselves in almost every sphere. Quite a task, surely.
Yes, and this validation. Well, when we go back in the news, was it in 2019, a national security policy was launched.
Yeah, that's right.
Then afterwards we had the national security strategy. Afterwards we had a security sector reform strategy. So it seems we are still at that stage. Sure. Really.
We're about to validate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what's going on? Sure. I mean, when you look at some of the reports, especially AUN reports, that there are sticky points here and there, mainly political.
Yes.
The tough decisions that should be taken, well, they haven't quite gathered the nerve, as it were, to take those decisions. Yeah. Some would tell you, and we have to say it here, when you look at the army, for instance, we need to downsize the numbers.
That's right.
But again, apparently most of them are jolas. Once you start doing that, it might be seen as sort of ethnic target.
Yeah,
so you have these political considerations that are really getting in the way, as it were, of clear, rational thinking.
Sure.
So this is really what it is. So we're just publishing papers after papers after papers. Well, we'll see when the actions will begin.
When the actions will begin. I think that's a perfect note on which to end, because, as Mr. Mboch says, we've been through several iterations of things to do with reforming the security sector, and this seems to be but the latest one. So, Mr. Mboch, thank you for all your interventions so far.
You're welcome.
And to our viewers, always thank you for watching, and until the next time, it's goodbye.